The Voice Protocol. Episode 7, The Fractured Silence. The Impossible is Protocol, by Roderick Sellers. Part 1. The Listening Post. The Wraith slid out of FTL on the far edge of a dead orbit and coasted on idle thrust, as if afraid to wake the dark. Ahead, the listening post hung like a broken tooth against a jaw of stars. Its skeletal arms jutted from a central hub where dish spines and antenna needles once bristled with attention, but now sagged under frost and old impact scars. In places, the hull had split and curled back like peeled bark, exposing ribs of lattice and cable runs furred with ice. Once, this had been a Concord crown jewel, one of the rim-ear stations built to hear everything. Its arrays had plucked whispers from pirate bands and border navies, sifted them, shaped them, sent them back as warnings and orders that moved fleets. Now its beacon lights were long dead, its solar sails hung like burned banners, and its registry, if anyone still checked, called it decommissioned. Kira Glitch Valen leaned out from under an open panel, hair stuck to her forehead in damp strands, a graphite smear across one cheek like a careless war stripe. Cold's fine, dead's worse. Dead stations keep secrets they shouldn't. Rika sat cat-like at the gunnery console, rifle balanced across her knees despite the ship's gravity. Her eyes measured distances no one else could see. Threat board? Nothing steady, Whisper said from the shadows behind her. His voice lived in the half-light. Heat ghosts. Static. Either this place is empty or it's practiced. Lumen tilted their head, pupils dilating until their irises thinned to silver rings. Their voice came in the register of a human whisper and a signal's undertone at once. It still listens. Not well. Like a deaf man pressing his ear to the ground for a train he only remembers. Oryx stood with a hand on a rib of the overhead, stone-veined bulk steadying the ship rather than the other way around. The light caught the cracks where heat pulsed faint, like magma in patient rock. "Stone here's waiting," he rumbled. "A bowl long empty, set out for rain." Thorne cinched his medcase straps as if the buckles might keep his guilt contained. He'd learned to keep quiet. The quiet didn't accuse him back with words. The voice entered Jax's skull with laboratory cold. Retrieve core data. Secure all surviving records. Leave survivors. Survivors? Jax asked aloud, even as he worked the seat harness loose. If any remain. The cadence carried its leash, that too clean pause before an omission. "Docking vector set," Vera said. "Collar looks starved for power. I'll coax it." The Wraith eased under the station's ruined spines. Shadow spilled over the canopy glass. The stars turned to beads in a net. A collar ring appeared, black with frost, its alignment tags dim. Vera feathered thrusters with the care of a surgeon moving a scalpel over an eye. Clamp motors woke like old animals, grinding, catching, then biting down with a groan that traveled the ship's bones. "Atmosphere?" Jax asked. Lumen's gaze unfocused as their implant sampled the thin air bleeding past the seal. "Oxygen at 40% Concord norm, trace toxins. Your lungs will complain, filters will keep you honest." "Filters on. We don't breathe their ghosts," Jax said. He stood, holstered sidearm, checked mags by touch. Rika point. Oryx behind her. Whisper and Lumen on systems. "Kira with me. Vera, keep the Wraith warm." "I'm not your dockhand," Vera said, though the corner of her mouth couldn't quite hold the scorn steady. "You're our way out," Jax answered. "If this place yawns and decides to swallow us, you pull teeth." She regarded him for a heartbeat, taking his measure the way pilots do. Consequence first, then rank. "Don't die in there," she said. "I don't like inheriting curses." The airlock cycled. Old air met new with a hiss that tasted of metal and mildew even through filters. The hatch irised open on a corridor lit by the refusal of failing bulbs to go black. They stepped into the listening post. The passage had been built for crews of 100 and the weight of their attention. Now it sounded like a museum corridor after hours. Frost had flowed out of vents and frozen into fangs that hung down like mineral teeth. Emergency strips glowed the tired orange of dying embers. Underfoot, the deck plates sang faintly. Thermal stress, Jax's training supplied, or the sound of something far away, shifting. "This much intact this long?" Rika murmured. "Either someone scrubbed and sealed after evacuation, or they never evacuated." "Look!" Whisper brushed at a panel with gloved fingers and revealed a series of etched scratches, hasty, jagged, human. SEALAFTLOCKHUBDONOTANSWER. Lumen paused, their head tilted like a dog listening to a whistle. "The structure hums wrong. The power flow climbed and dove. Someone raided, then repaired, then taught it a new song it can't quite sing." They moved deeper. They passed a commissary where serving trays lay in neat stacks, as if waiting for hands that only just left. A mug sat on a table, coffee frozen halfway to the rim, a ring of darker ice under thin frost. In the quarters ring, bunks bore the memory of bodies in their rumpled blankets. A child's drawing, a ship with smiling windows, was pinned to a bulkhead by a magnet shaped like a star. Jax didn't let himself stop. It wasn't discipline so much as a learned fear. If he read the letters on those pinned notes, he would learn their names, and names made the dead heavier. The central hub opened like the nave of a cathedral, 4 decks high, ribs of cable vaulting upward around a column of shimmering blue. The core. Once, technicians had prowled catwalks above, while analysts whispered down below. Now, dust hung like gauze over dead glass walls. The core's glow moved slow and patient as tides. "There!" Kira breathed. The awe in her voice wasn't for what it was, but for everything it could be turned into. Oryx's eyes warmed. A mountain of memory. Whisper angled toward the nearest console. "Let me speak to it before we pull it apart." Jax raised a hand, palm out. "Listen." They did. The hub hummed. The air clicked with the tinny tick of cooling metal. Then, faint as an old recording down a long pipe, a voice bled into the room. "Help!" Rika's shoulders tightened. She pivoted without swinging the rifle up too high. "Front! Left!" "Help me!" The voice warbled, stretched, broke. "Please. Still. Alive." Thorne's head jerked up. He took a step before he remembered how dumb hope could make a man. "There are survivors." The voice pressed into Jax with the pressure of cold water. "Ignore. Illusion. Proceed to extraction." The plea came again, louder, from somewhere the station chose. Jax tasted metal, the same tang that filled his mouth on Rhea 14 when 15 voices had become a single shriek, and then nothing. Orders had wanted one thing. His men had needed another. He had chosen wrong. He would spend the rest of his life paying a debt that had no accounting. "Core first," he said. "The voice, whatever it is, we find it after we have what we came for." Kira crouched by the spire plate, wrist lamp throwing hard white into a nest of wire. "Someone has loved this panel badly," she muttered. "Concord frame. Alien graft. Protocols braided. Whoever did this didn't want a Concord tech to ever feel at home here again." "Alien?" Rika asked. "Not pure," Kira said. "Hybrid. Someone married 2 languages and taught them to fight nice." Lumen laid a palm near the surface, not touching, letting capacitive fields taste their skin. Code glowed across the glass like frost growing in time-lapse. It remembers not only signals, it remembers how those signals were felt. The math is annotated with emotion. "Annotated?" Whisper's mouth tilted. "Whoever built that is a poet or a sadist." The hub's dead glass blinked alive, startled. Screens crawled with star maps so old entire borders were wrong. A wall of cursors began to jitter as if trying to catch up with a backlog of tasks they had been forced to forget. A projector hummed. A face stuttered on it, half complete, overexposed. A woman, hair tied back, eyes ringed by the exhaustion of someone who has slept 3 hours a week for a year. "If anyone finds this," she said, voice racked with static, "we—" The sound tore sideways into a scream. The image snapped black. Kira's tool sparked. Locks a snake. Bite one part and another flex's sweat trickled down her temple and ran clean paths through the grime. "Take your time," Jack said. "Time is the thing I never get," Kira shot back, but there was no heat in it, only velocity. Another voice poured through a ceiling speaker, male this time, clipped and calm with that Concord control tone Jax had once practiced in a room full of mirrors. "Protocol 9 Delta, quarantine. Do not answer external hails. Do not open—" The rest was eaten by a shriek of feedback. Whisper's fingers twitched over the console, never quite landing. They told themselves not to answer doors while someone pounded on them. Oryx placed his palm against a rib of the spire and closed his eyes. For a second, his entire body stilled in a way that made him look carved again. "The stone remembers vibrations," he said without opening his eyes. "Running, hammering, the small impacts of small hands. Then," his jaw flexed, "a big sound, the sound that ends arguments. 'Breach,' Rika said, 'or scuttle.'" The hub lights flared, then dimmed. Across the deck, a shutter banged. Somewhere in the station, a door slammed shut and locked with the bitter decisiveness of a trap deciding you belong to it. Klaxons coughed to life, too weak to properly wail, and made up for it by being pitiful. "Something woke," Lumen whispered, "or was waiting to be seen." "Keep at it," Jax told Kira. He shifted his weight, scanning the sight lines. Catwalk rails overhead, blind corners where service hatches opened into dark, an access ladder that went up into a throat of shadow. The station answered by showing them new ghosts. Screens along the hub walls, lit and populated, like the stage of a theater filled from the wings by a cast with missing faces. A fleet burned. A man ran down a corridor with a child in his arms and vanished into static. A map filled with dots turned red one by one like a bleeding constellation. "Jax!" Thorne's voice carried that particular tone of a medic speaking to someone who needs to sit down. "You're breathing too fast." "I'm fine," Jax said, which was the soldier's word for not fine at all. Kira's lamp stuttered on a line of embossed plate under the spire lip. She scrubbed with a gloved thumb and exposed a symbol Jax didn't recognize. Concentric circles broken by an angle, like an ear listening through a crack. "Not Concord," Kira said. "Whoever built this overlay didn't want to be found by their own bosses." "Or they did," Whisper said, "if the boss they served wasn't in uniform." Lumen's eyes went distant. "There's a second pattern hidden in the hum. A cadence that tries not to be heard by anything that speaks fleet." Jax knew that silence. He had lived inside it. "The voice used this place," he said. The voice arrived so cold it frosted the inside of his skull. "Proceed. Extract. Leave survivors." "Survivors where?" Jax snapped, too loud for a man trying not to be heard by a thing in the walls. Non-pertinent. "Then so's your tone," he muttered. An overhead speaker coughed, then pushed a new voice into the room. Not the woman, not the Concord officer. This one was younger, terrified. "Please, if anyone is there, we can't get the inner doors. My sister—" The rest sank into the hiss like a small stone hitting deep water. Thorne took another involuntary step. Rika's hand rose, palm out without looking at him, stopping him as neatly as if she'd been watching his eyes the whole time. "Later," she said, We don't die to rescue the dead. He flinched at that, as if she had told him a rule about himself and made it true. Kira hissed between her teeth. Almost. There. Talk nice. She nudged a final bundle where alien logic braided with human stubbornness, and the lock thunked over into a sound like relief. The core's glow climbed from tide to heartbeat. Done, she said. We can move the box. Whisper slid forward, hands hovering. Let's ask it what it wants to tell us before we steal it. Make it quick, Jack said. Whisper brushed the surface and let the old machine take a taste of him. The screens beside him jumped. Text poured like rain. Spoken words bled out of speakers that hadn't meant to speak again. Didn't know, we thought, if we could just... The station reached for a memory and found only the frame it had been stored in. It played the shape of events without their names. The floor answered with sound of its own, a scuff, too heavy for a rat, too soft for a mech. Rika pivoted just enough to point the rifle down the corridor to their left without putting her barrel between any of them and the core. Contact, she said under her breath. They came in wearing the past. Concord security suits, broken visors, chest plates scarred into scabs, seals hanging in ragged streamers. The men inside them didn't move like men. They moved like the suits remembered how. The first stumbled, the second caught itself on a handrail, a third dragged one leg. Their comms whispered, mouths of broken helmets gasping out words recorded 6 years ago. Hold the line! Leave the lights! Don't! Help me! Drones? Rika said. Lumen's voice went thin. No, not exactly. The station repurposed what it had. It taught the dead to make shapes in hallways. The first suit's head jerked toward the hub light like a moth fossil remembering heat. The hand came up, fingers bent wrong around a cutter torch welded where a palm had once ended. The torch coughed fire. Down! Jax barked. He shoved Kira sideways and took the heat off his shoulder, smelling cooked polymer and his own jacket smoking. Rika fired 2 clean shots through a broken faceplate. The body shuddered and went boneless, but the torch still sputtered on the floor, burning a crescent into the deck. Oryx stepped into the mouth of the corridor as if into surf. The second suit lunged. He caught it at the waist and broke it over his knee like a man snaps a rotten plank. The spine went with a brittle crunch and a sound like a trapped scream escaping a pipe. Something inside the armor clattered across the deck, a sphere, glassy and ridged, cracked, pulsing faint. Lumen stared. Memory bead, they whispered. Someone stored voice in bone. Less poetry, Rika snapped, stitching a third suit off its feet. More shooting. Whisper slid to the side of the entrance and flicked a hand. A panel that had sulked dead found itself suddenly ashamed and offered him a maintenance menu. He lied to it gently. The interior blast door began to descend from the ceiling with arthritic slowness. Kira, move, Jack said. She popped the core free of its understructure with the reluctant sigh of old metal finally giving in, and the 4 of them got hands under the sled. It was heavier than it looked, not from mass, but from consequence. They lifted. The station disagreed. From a catwalk above, 3 more suits spilled like dropped tools. One hung in its harness a second too long and tore free with a wet sound that made Thorn swallow back bile. The lead one had a breaching charge welded to its chest where a badge had once shone. It staggered toward the railing and simply fell, body aimed like a projectile. If it had hit where it wanted, it would have broken the core. Oryx turned into the fall, took the impact with both arms, and a boom that hammered the hub. Cracks lit across his chest, glowing brighter with pain. He roared, a short, furious sound that was more refusal than anger, and he flung the suit aside like trash. The blast door kept descending with the moral conviction of a bureaucrat. Another suit tried to scuttle under it and got flattened to a smear and a twitching hand. Rika put a bullet through the twitch, and the hand went quiet. Go, Jack said. breath tight. They hauled the core onto the sled and shoved. It hit the lip of the hub with a jolt that rattled teeth, then slid into the corridor beyond as if happy to be anywhere else. The lights flickered. The station tried another voice, the woman again, this time unbroken long enough to get a sentence out. "We couldn't stop him," she said. "He told us impossible was protocol." The projector burned out. The smell of scorched plastic bit the back of the throat. Jax felt the voice in him go perfectly still. Not gone, just listening to its own old echo. "Jax," Vera said in his ear, voice tight through the ship channel. "We have company on outer approach. No lights, no ID, smells like trouble that got dressed to look like a rock." "Hold them polite," Jax said. "We're coming." "Polite is expensive," she said. "I'll charge double." They muscled the core down the corridor, 6 hands doing the work of 8. Oryx took front weight with a grunt, lines of hot light crackling spider-like from shoulder to sternum. Thorn moved alongside him, hand steady, jaw set, the medic's body remembering that saving and braking often use the same muscles. The station tried one last trick. The floor in front of them shivered. Plates unlocked and shifted. A hole opened like a throat. For a heartbeat, the sled's front half hung over nothing, and the core tilted toward the dark. Kira dove. Not graceful, not professional, just fast enough. She threw her weight into the sled, boot heels skidding, teeth bared. Jax and Rika caught her belt and each other and yanked backward. The sled scraped, shrieked, then slammed down onto solid metal again. "Don't do that," Rika said without heat. "You scare bad." "Scaring bad keeps engines alive," Kira said, breathless, and shoved hair out of her eyes with her wrist. "Move." Whisper glanced up as they passed under a junction of cables laid like arteries over the corridor ceiling. "The station is trying to memorize us," he said. "If we die here, it will know our names by the shape of our steps." "Then walk ugly," Rika said. "Don't give it a clean copy." They made the last turn toward the docking collar, and the station obliged them with one last procession. 5 suits, shoulder to shoulder, filling the cross corridor ahead like a line of men who had once practiced drill together. Torches hissed. One lifted a length of serrated pipe and banged it against the wall in a rhythm that might have been a cadence if you were cruel enough to call it music. Oryx stepped forward, breathing deep. "Stone holds," he said. "Not today," Jax told him. "We go through, not through them." He pointed past the suits. Service duct. There. Lumen was already moving, fingers describing shapes in the air. The duct's lock recognized a master key it had never been issued and popped. Air like freezer breath gusted out. "Rika," Jax said. She didn't argue. She hurled a flash pellet down the corridor and looked away. The suits didn't. The pellet burst with a white scream. The dead turned their broken faces to the only light they could still see. Silence fell like a hammer after the sound, and in that split second of blindness, the team yanked the sled into the duct. The duct was too small for Oryx. He shouldered in anyway, stones scraping steel, sparks falling around his head like fireflies. Thorn ducked under him, braced the sled from below. Kira pushed from behind and swore tenderly at the ductwork until it chose not to cut her in half. Whisper crawled backward ahead of them, one hand keeping the sled's nose from catching, the other flicking a cheap jammer that made the duct sensors believe they were empty. Behind, the suits remembered how to stand. Ahead, the duct bent and yawned them into the collar throat. They spilled into the airlock like a handful of bones into a bowl. Vera's voice was already in Jax's ear. "Outer contact closing. Trajectory suggests confidence. I hate confidence." "Undock," Jax said. "We'll hot latch." "I will not," Vera said, and they could hear her smile. "Because I already did." The Wraith's clamps bit home with a bang. The inner hatch jerked open with the enthusiasm of a machine that loves 2 things: doing what it was built for, and not doing it for too long. They heaved the sled through. The docking collar lights stuttered and went black. The station gave up the last pretense of being a building and became a trap. Oryx turned in the hatchway, filling it completely, and held, one arm braced, back bearing the weight like a lintel, until everyone but him and Jax were through. The suits arrived a breath later, torches raised. Oryx let them jam themselves useless against the stone of him, then stepped backward into the Wraith like a cliff withdrawing into fog. The inner hatch sealed. The Wraith let out a sound like a relieved laugh as pressure equalized. The station pounded once, twice, stubborn child fists on a door that had closed forever. Jax sagged against the bulkhead, breath loud in his helmet. Kira slid down the wall and hit the deck plates with her eyes closed, lips moving as she counted parts she didn't break. Rika took stock of her magazine like a priest checking a rosary. Whisper smiled in a way that had nothing to do with joy, and everything to do with not being blamed by a dead station. Lumen pressed their fingers to the core and went quiet, the way a singer goes quiet backstage with a hand on their own throat. Oryx stood very still and let the cracks in his chest dim by degrees. Thorne's hands shook as he opened his case, adrenaline running out, guilt rushing back in to fill the empty space. He turned away, not to hide the shaking, but the way his eyes flinched at the sight of the datapad in the false bottom. He did not touch it. Not yet. "Contacts?" Jax asked, voice raw. Vera didn't answer for a beat. When she did, it was the sound of a pilot who has decided a thing and is willing to be judged for it later. "One ship. Cold running approach. No ID. Whoever they are, they don't want a conversation." "Concord?" Rika asked. "No," Whisper said. He had already slid into a chair and made the Wraith's sensors forget their bad mood. Not a cutter, not a corvette, not a patrol skiff. Signature is dressed in scavenged manners. That smell is private. And old. "Hunter," Vera said, low. The voice returned to Jax, bearing coordinates like a verdict. "Depart Theta 4. Deliver core. Do not engage." "Not helpful," Jax said, but noted. He turned to the crew. "Strap in. If they want to talk, we leave. If they want to bite, we teach them we taste bad." Oryx set his palm to the bulkhead as if blessing the ship. "Stone stands with motion," he said. "Go." Lumen slid into the auxiliary, hand hovering inches above the console. The lights steadied as if the Wraith had inhaled, then remembered how. Kira met Vera's eyes across the deck, pilot to engineer, truce forged under fire and held by the promise of work unfinished. "Your manifold will hold," she said. "Don't ask for glory. Ask for grace." "Grace I can do," Vera said, mouth crooked. "Glory gets pilots killed." Rika buckled in without looking away from the forward glass. "Let them come." It's been a quiet day. Whisper's fingers wove lies into the Wraith's transponder. For a heartbeat, the ship would present as a mail courier with a lawful complaint and a bad attitude. It wouldn't hold, but most lies don't need to. Only long enough to make a hunter blink. The Wraith's clamps released with a clunk. The station receded, a tooth returning to a dead jaw. Out beyond, a dot detached itself from shadow and began to grow with the patient certainty of something that never misses. A man sat in that dot. In a cockpit scraped clean of sentiment, in a ship called the Ash Serpent, because names matter to hunters even when they pretend they don't. His left eye was a lens, his right was pale and very human. He watched the Wraith like a wolf watches an injured elk and made no noise at all. Vera curved them out on a line that put the station between the Wraith and the oncoming. For a second, the geometry held. The post was a planet. They were a moon. He was a comet. Then he adjusted, and the line broke. "Jax," Vera said quietly, "tell me when to run." "On my mark," he said, and felt the voice in his skull like frost on glass that hadn't yet cracked. They had the core. They had their lives for the moment. They had the station's last confession bottled like a storm in a jar. Behind them, the listening post went on listening to nothing, compiling silence, building memories out of echoes. Ahead, a hunter came on without lights, patient as gravity. "Mark," Jack said. The Wraith's engines lit with a sound like a throat clearing after a long vow of silence. The ship knifed into the dark. The station turned its dead face away. The approaching dot grew teeth. And Part 2 began to write itself in the blank between those two motions. Part 2. The Bounty's Shadow. The jump was a ragged tear. The Wraith fell into it like a dancer hitting a mark exactly 1 frame late and making the mistake look like invention. For an instant, everything in the cabin went very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your bones remember you are a bag of water in a metal box in a place that does not love either. Then the ship came back to itself with a jolt that rattled bolts and teeth and a few certainties. Alarms sighed their disappointment. The board rolled green across everything that mattered enough to not lie about it. The stars were different in the honest way that says you have cheated a hunter out of a meal and he will remember. Silence. Then breath. Rika unclenched her jaw. Oryx eased his back off the wall and the hull seemed grateful. Thorn let his fingers come away from the med case and leave crescents in the plastic. Whisper leaned his head back and shut his eyes, not in relief, but in the way a man files a file. Lumens sagged in their chair, fingers still making music in the air. "Do not ask me to do that twice in a day," they said, and smiled as if they might anyway. Vera exhaled, long and steady, hands never leaving the arcs. She turned her head finally to look at Kira. "She usually hates new hands," she said. Kira swallowed, flushed with the after-rush and the heat of being seen. "Your ship is a liar," she said, "but I like liars who try." Vera's mouth bent, something wry and not unfriendly. "Then we will get along," she said. Jax watched them, a pilot and an engineer circling the same pride from different sides, and felt something loosen in his chest. Not trust, not yet, but a shape he recognized. The voice came back with the calm of frost. "Secure ship. Deliver to coordinates Theta 4. Leave the pilot." Jax didn't bother to hide his reply. "No." Non-compliance noted. Efficiency reduc --. He cut the thought off with a laugh he didn't own and didn't apologize for. "You can lie about coordinates all day. You don't get to tell me who we keep." Vera was watching his face. She didn't ask who he was arguing with. She knew. "You work for a thing that can't tell the truth," she said, turning back to the console, fingers light. "That means you're either brave or doomed." "Both," Jack said. She nodded as if that satisfied an equation. "Then hear this. You didn't rescue me. You borrowed me. I'm not your asset. I'm the Wraith's pilot and her diplomat. If you try to trade me for a better name, I'll put your corpse out an airlock with ceremony." Rika grinned despite herself. Oryx rumbled approval. Whisper looked at the ceiling like he was asking it to remember this day. Thorn stood very still, hearing the word asset like an accusation he had stamped on his own face. Lumen tilted their head and listened to the ship fall into a slower, steadier hum. "Borrowed works," Jack said. "We'll take borrowed." Vera stared at the emptiness where their hunters used to be and saw 100 doors the voice would never be allowed to name. "Good," she said, "because the first thing you need to borrow is a better home." Kira bristled, half offended and half aroused by the promise of work. "This wreck is your idea of home?" Vera's hand stroked the console once. The ship purred a beat lower. "She's ugly because she tells the truth," she said. "All the pretty ships belong to people who never did." Kira opened her mouth, closed it. "Your radiator still pisses in your shoes." "And you're going to fix that," Vera said. Not a question, a small surrender. The lights steadied. The Wraith's engines evened into something approximating grace. Out the forward glass, the disputed rim was a slate of stars without a flag, the kind of place where a ship could carve her own name if she had hands, and a pilot and a mechanic who had decided to forgive each other a little. Jax let his eyes rest there for a breath he didn't have to count, and then the math came back. "Whisper," he said. "What follows a crooked jump?" "Regret," Whisper said, "and a tracer they'll pretend they didn't see." "Can you make them regret the tracer?" Jax asked. Whisper's smile was small and hungry. "I can make the tracer regret us." "Oryx," Jax said, "if the ship shakes, you hold." "Stone holds," the Karok said. "Rika," Jax said, "keep the gun warm without making it angry." "I'm charming," she said. "Thorn," Jax said. "If anyone on this ship is bleeding and doesn't know it, find the blood and put it back." Thorn exhaled. "Aye." "Lumen," Jax said. "Talk to her without making her love you." Lumen's laugh was a bell. "Too late." "Kira," Jax said, and felt the gear engage that had nothing to do with engines. "Make a list. Then make a second list. Then tear out the first one and tell me the second is what you always meant." Kira had already pulled a panel, already made a mental map that looked suspiciously like affection. "I'll need parts," she said. "And time. And for her pilot to stop touching things while I make her better than she remembers." Vera's head turned. "We'll negotiate," she said. "We will," Kira said. They looked at each other like two mechanics arguing over the same engine from opposite sides of the car. Jax let it be. Some negotiations you didn't stand between unless you wanted to lose fingers. The voice had not left. It never would. It could not ask for the thing it wanted, not directly. It could not tell the truth if the truth would be a blow. So it did what it had always done. It pointed at doors. A new set of coordinates folded into Jax's head with the careful handwriting of a man who never crossed out a line. Theta 4. Debrief. Deliver ship. Jax set the Wraith's course 10 degrees off those coordinates and told himself it was a rounding error. The lie made the truth easier to hold. Vera pretended not to see the angle, or pretended to pretend. "If we're going to be a crew," she said, "you should learn how to drink something that doesn't taste like solvent. I have a bottle that survived 4 treaties and a war. I promised it to anyone who made the Wraith sing again." "She didn't sing," Kira said, nose wrinkling. She cleared her throat. "Close enough," Vera said. Rika snorted. Whisper smirked. Oryx's grin was a tectonic shift. Lumen looked pleased in a way Jax had never seen and could not name. Thorn tucked his guilt somewhere he could carry it without spilling for an hour. Jax watched his crew, 8 now if you counted the ship, and let the thought settle that he was building a family out of every rule he had broken. He let it settle and did not love it yet. Love made you slow. He could not afford slow, but he could afford this, a ship that wasn't stolen, a pilot whose mouth could get them out of wars or into them, an engineer who would pick a fight with entropy and win, a soldier who had chosen failure on purpose and was still here to choose again. "Welcome aboard," he said to Vera Kale. "Don't make it a habit," she replied. The Wraith turned her nose to the dark and went on with the confidence of a liar who had decided to tell the truth whenever it would hurt the right people. Behind them, the cutter and the corvette compared notes and found a hole shaped like a ship they both already hated. Ahead of them, the coordinates glowed like a trap written by a god who could not admit to murder. Between those two facts, a ship rattled toward becoming a home. Jax gripped the armrest until his knuckles ached and let himself smile once, small and mean. He could work with lies that had a shape. He could carve space from the polite grammar of warm words. He could choose the impossible and call it protocol. Hold course, he said. Vera did. Epilogue. The hunter waits. But the dark had not forgotten them. Far behind, where the listening post turned on its broken axis, a shadow detached itself cleanly from orbit. The ash serpent angled its hull without lights, without signature, as if the void itself had taught it how to stalk. Inside, the hunter sat very still. One hand rested on the throttle, the other on a blade laid across his knees. His left eye was a lens that recorded everything. His right was pale, human, and unblinking. On his screens, the Wraith glowed faint, a heartbeat he had already claimed. He did not hurry. Hunts this old were never about speed. They were about certainty. He smiled once, a thin white scar of a mouth, and whispered to no one at all. "Run!"